Hey friends, welcome to episode 614 of the My 123 Cents podcast. I'm Kevin Hunsberger, joined once again this week by Chad Smart. And I just had my glasses on and I took them off. Chad, I did not read your shirt. What's your shirt this
It's
week?
a hot rod shirt, Roddy
Perfect.
Piper.
And we didn't discuss the topic this week, so this is actually going to work out very well. I've got my hot rod down there in the corner, but yeah, this is my. I think you sent me this one, Legends bit. If you're not watching, 8-bit Legends with
Yeah.
different WWE legends on it, because we're going to go back in time and of course tie it into today's wrestling as well. But I mentioned hot rod, and off the top here. I was in Japan when this went on sale from Mattel Creations, so Chad hopped online for me and ordered this. I actually tried to get it. I think his buddy Eric tried to look for it at Comic-Con, but it is the Captain Lou Albano, Cyndi Lauper, Roddy Piper 3-pack from 1984, July. And I remember, and that's why this one, because I don't typically buy the Mattel figures. I usually get the LJNs or get for the smaller figures, but this one, I remember watching this one very specifically. It was in the summer. We were getting ready to go on or we had just gotten back from a float trip with the Boy Scouts. And so I just, for some reason, that episode of Piper's Pit really stuck out to me. And that's kind of what we're talking about this week is nostalgia and memories, but also those moments that stick with us because as we'll get to, are there moments today that 40 years from now will be created in figure form that fans will eat up? Because this sold out. I think you had almost had trouble getting it, but were able to purchase it. But uh, you know, it's just one of those things. But what is your hot rod shirt?
It's just one that came in the
Mm,
Wrestle Crate.
Wrestle Crate stuff.
So it just says Hot Rod Roddy Piper. Yeah. Yeah, that 3-pack, I was gonna get that for you for your birthday and tell you that it was a birthday present. And then I bought it and I saw what the cost was, and I said, no way he's worth that much.
Yeah,
And
it's not a cheap set.
no. Which again goes back into action figures. Are they toys or are they collectibles now?
Yeah.
And cheap plug, you can go over to I guess right now it's still Out of Touchstone YouTube page, and episode 4 of Question Everything. I talked with a friend of ours, Dalton Anthony, about figure collecting, and that was an interesting conversation. So,
It was, and I was going to plug that and
yeah,
mention that Dalton is a lot younger than both of us. Was not
right.
alive when this moment happened, but he actually bought this set too. He messaged me. I posted a video and I'm not. I think I'm part of the appeal for this one for me, kind of like the Hulk Hogan and Zeus figure a few years ago. It was the Comic-Con exclusive. It was in a VHS pack promoting No Holds Barred, and I was trying to get that one too and failed. But to me, the packaging, because I typically, if you're watching, I have them all loose, but I think I'm keeping this in the box because it just the old TV and it brings it all together. And there's old stickers, and I say old stickers. They're modeled to be old stickers, but they're more modern. They do say WWE and not WWF. But yeah, Dalton already has his out of the package. I haven't seen any pictures of it set up, but that, like you said, collecting versus toys. I don't think, not just because of the price, but just because of the people involved, I don't think many kids are going to be pining for this particular set. But the old guys like myself, it's going to bring back that nostalgia pop and those memories of this happening. And I actually have years ago, probably 25 years ago, I bought, and it's in my bin of magazines, but I bought the WWF magazine that had the cover of this incident on it as well. And I say incident because Cyndi gets physical with both Piper and Albano, but I'll dig that out and probably put it when I display it. It'll all kind of come together with that.
Yeah.
But
Real quick,
yeah.
with that set being released, and Mattel released all their new figures at Comic-Con. They showed what's coming up. I guess I don't know if it's for the year, or for 6 months, whatever. But they have if you buy a certain line of figures, you get a piece of another figure.
Oh yeah,
so you can buy the Build-A-Figure, which this year again kids are going to be loving the Buddy Roberts Freebird Build-A-Figure. next year, should they do a Dave Wolf
Oh,
build a figure?
man, that would be some really deep nostalgia because I remember too because David Wolf for those who don't know, David Wolf was Cyndi Lauper's producer slash boyfriend back in this rock and wrestling era. He actually managed the Freebirds in their very short run in the WWF in 1984, but he was also the one that got kind of beat up during the shortly after this incident on Piper's Pit. Captain Lou turns face, and he and Cyndi Lauper team up to fight multiple sclerosis, and they're going to honor.
Did they win?
They did not win, but
Bummer.
they honored Cyndi Lauper. It was all on MTV, and this is again one of those memories, those core memories. And Piper comes out, takes the framed platinum or gold album of "Girls Just Want to Have Fun,"
Yeah.
smashes it over Albano's head, kicks Cyndi Lauper, and then body slams. Although Gorilla Monsoon on commentary says pile drives, but he bodies like
Mhm.
power slams David Wolf, and so that you throw Dick Clark in there and you could have another three pack of
Hey, everyone wants a dick in a box.
yeah. But yeah, back to your collecting versus
Yeah.
playing with, the cost is one thing. We talked about the LJNs, and they're doing a Cyndi Lauper LJN, and I think in hindsight, if I'd have known, I do like this set, don't get me wrong, but if I'd have known that the Cyndi Lauper LJN was coming out, I might have not bought this and just reenacted this scene with, because I already have the Captain Lou and the Rowdy Roddy Piper LJNs. But anyway, um, they're about 25 bucks these days. And back in the day, obviously in the 80s when we were collecting
Mm.
six, seven, there I did it again,
Yeah.
bucks for them. But yeah, it does. And they're releasing so many cool, and it's like, slow down, guys, slow down. I'm running out of space, but then also trying to uh finance some of these things. And
Right.
the big rubber guys, as we talked about, are twice as much. But there's that coolness factor and that collectability, that yeah, I'm not going to have my Kerry Von Erich big rubber guy fight John Cena anytime soon, so they'll stay more pristine, I guess, as
Mm.
opposed to the ones that I have from my childhood that are all kind of beat up. But it is fun. Collecting is fun, and the hunt to me is even more fun because I could have bought a lot of the ones that I didn't get as a kid on eBay and pay through the nose for them. But I like going to flea markets and garage sales and things and kind of looking around and trying to find them. So for me, that part of it is still fun and brings back that nostalgia.
I agree. Although I don't collect, so except for you see the figures behind me
Yeah.
that come in the Russell Crate box, but I have no choice over which ones come. They
Hmm.
just show up, and I put them on the shelf. And I think he's not. He fell down, but I had the Genius up on top of the hockey pucks, but he's taking a nap.
Well, and sometimes, you don't keep all of them. What do you use as criteria of what you're going to keep? If Because sometimes you send stuff for the prize vault here.
Yeah, I mean, I keep most of the micro brawlers. The
Hmm.
stuff I send to you is usually the other trinkets and tchotchkes that they put in the box and the t-shirts. So, but the figures I usually keep.
Yeah.
I mean, if they send me, because there's not WWE related, with the exception of old school,
Yeah.
guys that are no longer there. So I don't think there's anybody, like if they send me a Randy Orton or a Roman Reigns, those would probably end up in you. But old school, I can't think of anybody,
Yeah.
you know, maybe a Bastion Booger, but
Well, and that's the good thing about those micro brawlers too, is they're small enough, and you don't need a whole lot of real estate in your apartment to
yeah.
display those or put those out. So, and speaking of, Chad mentioned prizes. We're building up to 1,000 followers on Facebook. So if you haven't already, go follow the page. And at every benchmark, the last time I looked was this morning. We were at 786. So that's just 214 away. So when we hit 800, 850, 900, 950, and then 1,000 will be a big prize. But we're doing prizes at those 150 increments. So check it out, facebook.com/my123cents. Click that follow button. We're trying to build a community there. I'm trying to put more engaging things out there. And Chad, Speaking of engaging, you had a really good question that you wanted to throw out there, and I think this could be almost like a question of the week for our listeners
Mm.
and viewers to answer in the comment section as well. Go ahead with that.
Where do babies come from?
Well, when a man and a woman love each other very, very much, they kiss and they let no.
So lame joke. Yeah, no, we were talking beforehand, and I said, with as of when we were recording this, AEW's All In is a week away. There are strong hints of the New Day showing up. Kofi and Austin Creed. I think Big E is still under contract to WWE. Plus, his wrestling career is over, so he will not be joining them. But the two members will be joining Swerve Strickland for a trios title match. Again, that is what is being implied.
Mhm.
Again, AEW has not said so. So if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But
Right.
my question is it better to hint at that and get anticipation, or should they just come right out and say, hey, the New Day is going to be here, maybe get a few extra people watching the pay-per-view, maybe sell a few extra tickets um, in London? And I guess part of this depends on who that rumor, who the surprise versus announcement is, because obviously, if they announce, I'm trying to think of all the other WWE talent that is available now,
Mhm.
where they have the same impact as the New Day. So,
You know, I think a lot of times it depends on the situation. In this circumstance, I don't necessarily think because as we get going in this episode, we're going to talk about not surprises per se, but like kind of those moments and those
mhm.
memories. And so, I think announcing New Day, or they're obviously not going to be called New Day, but for the sake of this situation,
Yeah,
we'll call them the New Day. Announcing them, I don't think is going to move the needle either way. I don't think people are going to necessarily, unless we're going to be that match that everybody's been talking about against the Bucks, for example. So I don't think announcing it is necessarily, but having that surprise. But now it's become so much chatter that people are expecting it. Because I think back to think when the New Day announced the Hardys at WrestleMania, whatever it was, a few years
yeah.
ago in that ladder match, that was a legitimate, or at least to me, it was one that the internet hadn't spoiled yet. So whenever you can have a surprise, I always think it's a good thing, and I don't think that creating those memories in those moments. Back in '91, when Bobby Heenan showed up on WWF TV holding Ric Flair's big gold belt, that was
Mhm.
a legitimate surprise. But then also in that same era, and in the golden era, we were seeing vignettes of wrestlers coming in. Dusty Rhodes is coming to the WWF. To me, and maybe the vignette itself is the surprise, because
Yeah.
Vince McMahon tosses from the announce desk, and now we're gonna see a newcomer to the World Wrestling Federation, and then boom, it's Dusty Rhodes pulling up in a plumbing truck. Total surprise to me, because again, the internet hadn't ruined it. So I do think announcements can be the surprise depending on how it's framed and how you do it. So that may not be the best answer, but
Mhm.
I'm 50-50. Jericho back in '99 when he came to the WWF, we saw those Y2J. We didn't know it was
Mhm.
Y2J at the time, but the countdown pops up, and I
Yeah.
think smart fans probably figured out that it was going to be Chris Jericho, but we didn't know exactly. And it did time out to where, oddly enough, yeah, he's showing up on Monday Night Raw. So
Yeah.
it depends on how creative they get with the surprise, and because I think you would also agree with this, and I'm not picking on AEW, but it was a couple years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago now, when Daniel Bryan and Adam Cole, and I think maybe a couple of other guys, all showed up as surprises on the same pay-per-view event. Is that accurate?
Those two, yeah.
It was
Uh,
just the two of them. Okay.
yeah, Adam Cole came out for everybody was expecting Daniel Bryan.
Hmm.
Adam Cole came out towards the end of the show, and then Bryan came out shortly thereafter. So it was like you had the anticipation, that you subverted with someone else, and then you gave them what they wanted.
Yeah. And help me remember too, in 2023 at Survivor Series, was Randy Orton announced
He
as
came back.
returning, or was he the surprise partner for that team in the
I
War
think
Games
he may have
match?
been the surprise.
And I
I
think
can't
he was a
remember.
surprise too. And then, 20 minutes later, after the match is
Yeah,
over, the show seemingly ends, and then
yeah,
Punk's music
yeah,
hits. So it kind of eclipsed, or, however fans want to look at that. So
yeah.
those again, were good surprises that yeah, I think more people may have bought tickets to the show if they knew Punk was going to show up, because I still think Punk is a needle mover.
In
But yeah,
Chicago.
in Chicago, well, yeah, especially in Chicago, but excuse me, as far as the upcoming event with All In, I
Mhm.
don't know that fans are going to necessarily, and I may be wrong. I don't know that, knowing that Kofi and Xavier are going to be a part of the show, I don't know that they're going to necessarily run to the box office or jump online and buy
Yeah.
tickets, just knowing that those two specifically are coming. I could be wrong. What is your view?
Well, before I get to my view, I was going to ask, we've seen two recent returns in WWE. One, Big Cass got promos, telling us he was going to show up, and then just, randomly shows up at the end of matches, beating people up. He hasn't, to my knowledge, hasn't had an official match yet. He's never been. I think he may have had a backstage segment, but I was going to say, like, he hasn't. There hasn't been a official Big Cass appearance, if you will.
Hmm.
And then you had Baron Corbin show up and cost Trick at the end of a match, or Camelo, one of the two. Um, would those be better had they announced them, or not been better, depending on the situation? Would it have been better to have Cass just show up if he's just going to show up at the end of a match and attack someone? Would that have been better than building him up? And Baron Corbin would have been better to forget that he exists. But
Yeah,
uh,
I
um,
think we agree we're not big Baron Corbin fans.
I think I like Baron Corbin better on the radio than wrestling, and that's not a knock. I actually
Right.
find his takes on things
Hmm.
better than a lot of the other personalities that were on the Busted Open Radio, which is now Radio WWE, which I just resubscribed to Sirius, so maybe I'll give that a listen this week.
Hmm.
But
I agree with you. I think that, like, I've seen some of his cooking videos on TikTok. So
mm,
I think the man behind Baron Corbin, and I don't remember his full name, Tom.
Tom
Uh,
Pestock,
yeah,
something like that.
so it's not a knock against him 100%, but yeah, I'm not
Yeah,
a big fan of his. So, um, but yeah, like I said, I think it kind of goes to who the surprise
that
is, or
is
who
it.
the return is. For weeks, people have been speculating, maybe months now, that Big Bill
Mm,
or Big Cass was coming back with Enzo, and
yeah,
so I'm wondering if he's picking on these smaller guys to then bring Enzo into the fold. I don't know.
uh,
I've read, countless reports, and I guess now with the MFTs, the mother effing Tongans, now not the My
it's my
Family
favorite
Tree
Tongans.
Tongans. Yeah, um, we're getting a renaissance in the tag team division, which again is curious that, well, New Day, I think it was more their decision to leave and not
Mm.
WWE's. But with the Motor City Machine Guns and some of the other MFT
The
and the
Wyatt
Wyatt
Six, and
Six,
yeah,
why are we maybe repackage these guys instead? And now we're basically starting over with tag teams and trying to create a new division. I don't know, but I liked Enzo and Big Cass as a team. I liked them better
mm-hmm.
as a team than when they split them up. So if Enzo is in fact coming back too, I do hope they pair them back up, because I do like the big guy, little guy dynamic of, Team Hell No or Hell Yes with
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Bryan and Kane back in the day. Um, and I'm sure there are other examples I'm not thinking of at the moment, but um, Andre and Haku, I
Hillbilly Jim,
guess.
Haiti
And
Kid.
Uncle Elmer. Oh yeah, and Haiti Kid. So yeah, I guess back to your original question, those guys don't necessarily, they're not, to me, they're not needle movers. But if we were going to start teasing I guess Cody Rhodes would be a good example of someone who
Mhm,
there was that speculation. I can remember first hearing it. I think Ric Flair and who was Mark Madden when they were doing a
mhm,
podcast had speculated that Cody was going to. They were the first ones that I heard say that, and I was like, "There is no way in hell Cody Rhodes is going to go
mhm.
back to WWE." And then when it happened, and I think that one was a surprise, yes, because it was not. They didn't say who Seth's partner or opponent at
They did.
WrestleMania,
I mean,
but it was kind
again,
of
the
inferred.
internet knew,
The
but
internet knew, but the WWE
yeah,
never acknowledged it, right?
not never. Yeah,
So I mean, if Big Cass, for example, had been that
mm,
mystery opponent, the internet would have been pissed off, but
yeah,
not with just cause because they just speculated that it was going to be Cody. No one had said, and I don't think
right.
WWE even left any like. Sometimes they'll leave those red herrings out
Mhm,
that
mm,
make you think it's going to be somebody, and then it ends up not being. So I don't think WWE would have been in the wrong or to blame for that. But you know how wrestling fans are. We're going to blame, or I don't think I'd necessarily do that, or you do
mhm,
that, but some of that community does go after the promotion. Like you said before
yeah,
with Nick or with Tony Khan saying one of his favorites was coming in and it ended up being Christian Cage. And Tony didn't say it was going to be Brock Lesnar or John Cena or
yeah,
whomever, but so yeah, that unfair expectation from fans sometimes I think dampers the surprise or whatever as well. Because now you've said
yeah,
if anybody but Xavier and Kofi show up as Swerve's partners next
yeah,
week, people are going to be pissed and
yeah.
not justifiable in my
Um,
opinion.
yeah, and to go back to your question for 5 minutes ago,
Mhm.
I think honestly, I don't think there's any wrestler today that is an actual needle mover, and that includes Punk, Roman Reigns, John Cena. I think part of the tribalistic nature of wrestling is that fans who, and I'm going to kind of generalize here, but fans who are not wrestling fans, I think wrestling fans watch both promotions, but
Mhm.
I think you have WWE fans and you have AEW fans, and it doesn't matter who's on the show, they're not going to watch just to see a specific wrestler. They might watch clips online just to see what they're doing, but I don't think they're going to turn over and be like, oh yeah, now I'm a fan of this promotion because this wrestler's here.
Yeah,
Um,
like you. So what if I'm understanding, if
yeah,
Roman Reigns were to get released tomorrow and show up at All In,
yeah,
people would talk about it for probably 24 hours, maybe 48 to 72 hours, but then
yeah,
the talk would go away, and I don't
yeah.
think it would
And
necessarily
Dynamite's ratings are
generate
going to
new
stay the
fans.
same. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
that's an interesting take because back in the day, I think during the Monday Night War, that's what we lived on. We lived
yeah,
on seeing Chris Jericho jump or Sean Waltman go back, back and forth, or
mm,
whoever was going back and forth at the time. We were almost again, we were conditioned to expect that surprise versus
yeah,
having that reality, I guess, of what was going on. And I don't think we'll ever get back to that. But I also think in the long run, even though the Attitude Era, and you and I have talked about this before, we were golden era guys, I think,
mm,
and look more fondly look back at that time than the Attitude Era, although I do enjoy moments and snippets from that Attitude Era as well. But I think in some example, or in some cases, it hurt the longevity of what we're watching today.
yeah.
Yeah, so you agree with that?
No, I agree. I mean, I think you go back to the My 123 Cents blog archives. I think I've written about that before. It's
Hmm.
because, again, I think it led to the everybody has to be a champion,
Hmm.
or else they're being buried.
Yeah.
It leads to the we were talking earlier about the comparison of Mick Foley being thrown off the top of the Hell in the Cell. Now, almost every Hell in a Cell match, if it doesn't go outside and go to the top, it's not seen as being very good.
Hmm.
Um, and then you compare that with Darby Allin doing something stupid in almost every match of his.
Yeah.
It's like, how much the spectacle is there, but the memory isn't. And I
Yes.
don't know, maybe again, we're old, and I couldn't tell you what happened on indie show 3 weeks ago, so maybe I'm not the person to be talking about this, but Um, what are the moments that are going to stick out, 20 years ago? Because, and I think it also happens because, it's hindered by how good week to week show is.
Hmm.
Again, go back to the golden era. You didn't see Hulk Hogan on TV every week. You
Right.
didn't see title matches every week. They got built up, and now matches just get thrown out randomly to pop the crowd, try to pop a rating, and there's no. I don't think there's any real emotional attachment to a lot of what happens on TV.
And what role, if any, do you think social media plays in that? Because I do think social media is good in the fact that I can now watch AEW clips at least.
Mhm.
If I don't have HBO Max, which I don't, um,
Which you
I can
should, but
watch TNA, I can
yeah.
watch New Japan or CMLL or a AAA. I can watch those companies that I don't necessarily have full access to, but I can still see those clips. But then
Mhm.
does that, uh, you know, like we used for, the example that I keep going back to, Foley being thrown off the Hell in a Cell in 1998. It was the early days of the internet, but
Mhm.
no social media at that point. So
Yeah.
WWE was able to use that footage I don't know if strategically is the right word, but we were able to see that and it was a burned in memory. But then, like you said, it kind of raised the bar and the expectation then that every time. So then when Rikishi does it a year and a half or 2 years later and gets pushed off and into that bed of that truck, people kind of crapped on it because it didn't have the same, pardon the pun, impact that the Foley spot did. And
Mhm.
I think that that will never, I don't won't say never, but to me that moment, that Hell in a Cell moment, is probably the premier Hell in a Cell moment that will not be topped. And then you go into the Darby Allens of the world who do the daredevil moves week in and week out. Does that take
Mhm.
away from him, or do the fans now expect, even if he's wrestling an enhancement talent, or if he's wrestling MJF, or if he's wrestling
Mhm.
um, uh, John Moxley, we expect now for him to do something. You said stupid earlier, but those
Mhm.
daredevil moves that we don't necessarily. I know I and you probably would agree. We don't want to see these guys hurt. I kind of
Yeah.
look away during ladder matches, even still, even in WWE, and I don't like the skewers and the staples and the syringes. I don't like any of that stuff. So
Yeah.
I skip those things intentionally. But that's just my personal opinion on those kinds of matches. But do we as fans expect so much that if the talent feel like if they don't do that, they're going to fall out of favor with fans?
I would say you possibly at least a little bit,
Hmm.
because I think that's, again, it's the expectation of the sickos
Hmm.
to want that. And I do think, I mean, I'm not a death match guy, and I can take violence to a limit. And I think for me, death matches are I don't want to say the people in there, involved are not talented,
Right.
because
Right.
you know it takes some talent. But to me, death matches are violence for the sake of violence,
Hmm.
which you can also do without skewers and syringes. And I think the syringe spot is not really. I think the connotation of a needle to most people, it's like not a phobia, but it's preying on this fear. I guess that would be a phobia. But sticking a needle through your
Right.
syringe through your cheek is not really a, a
It's a visual for sure.
it's a visual thing more than a. It's
Yeah.
more psychological, I guess,
Yeah.
than pain. Um, but yeah, the skewers in the head. I I think if you're going to do it, that has to be saved for the final blow off. Like, this feud has been building. We've hit the crescendo now.
Hmm.
But just to do it in a regular match, yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Well, and that kind of feeds into this next point of, and again, it's not I'm not knocking anyone, but that's become the baseline for AEW.
Mm,
Fans expect that, the sickos expect that week in and week out. Whereas in WWE, they are very tepid with the blood, for example. And I'm going back, and this is someone correct me if I'm wrong, but my last memory of like a bloody match was the Drew
mm,
McIntyre CM Punk Hell in a Cell from
mm.
probably almost 2 years ago. And people have talked about how great that match was, and there was
Yeah,
blood and there was this and there was that. And I think maybe sprinkling that stuff, because had they not bled, would people still
yeah.
remember it, and would it be held up as one of these great matches? Or because we're seeing Moxley, or uh, I don't know how often Darby Allin bleeds, but he does put himself in those situations. But Mox bleeds all the time, it seems. And
Mhm.
I guess at one point Dusty and Ric Flair bled a lot as
I
well.
mean, yeah, if the wind blows, Ric Flair
Yeah.
bleeds. So
And so um but sometimes WWE is criticized because they have these Hell in a Cells, or they have these types of matches where no one bleeds, and I
yeah.
think they're more intentional with that to not happen. So could they offer up a little more of that, and could AEW scale back a little bit on that? Or these are the niches, and these are the fans, the sickos, as Tony
Mm,
Khan and they call themselves, as
yeah.
that's what they have come to expect it. But again, for me, it's not my cup of tea. But you are also, and this is feeding into a whole nother story. You were watching, we were both watching, but you, I think, were more intently watching the early days of ECW, where we were seeing barbed wire bats and
Yeah.
table spots and flaming branding irons, or whatever the
Yeah.
case was. So it really kind of changed the face of wrestling as well, I think, to an extent.
Yeah. And I think real quick, if you have a Hell in a Cell match and you're, like Brock Lesnar and Oba Femi just had one at SummerSlam.
Yeah.
They didn't really use the cage that much.
Hmm.
But, you know, I remember back watching, the monthly shows from MSG and Boston Garden. And I remember a promo with the British Bulldogs. They're going to face the Dream Team at the next show in a steel cage match. And I
Hmm.
remember them standing behind this cage with a head of lettuce and you know, shredding the lettuce on the cage and be like, this is what we're going to do to your face.
Hmm.
And when you do that and then you go into a cage match and there's no blood,
Yeah.
there's a disconnect.
Right.
You know, and I think that's part of WWE's, I don't want to say problem, but if you're having a cage match, a Hell in a Cell, and you're using the cage or you're using weapons and there's no blood, it's like, wait a minute, something's not right. Whereas, in AEW, when a guy gets thrown into the turnbuckle and is bleeding, you're like,
Hmm.
wait a minute, that's also not right.
Yeah.
And then there was the situation a couple weeks ago where Don Callis hit Chris Jericho in the head with a screwdriver, and there was no marking, nothing. And they're like, so I think you need to look at the situation and determine if blood is a legitimate outcome of the situation, it should be there. And if
Hmm.
it's not, then it shouldn't. It
Hmm.
shouldn't be just, oh, I'm going to bleed for the sake of bleeding.
Yeah.
And I also don't think, the second match on a show that's a random match should have, blading or getting color. If someone gets busted open hard way, that's a whole separate
Sure.
situation. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I think, obviously, the focus of what the two companies are, who they're aiming for,
Hmm.
it's totally different. And I think AEW has recognized that there are fans out there that want the more physical style,
Hmm.
and so they're giving it to them.
Is
And
that
again, I think that's a good play because it separates AEW from WWE.
It does, but and I don't think it's been as prominent as it has been in the past. But Tony Khan was always very insistent on being um, one day taking over, or being number one, or whatever the
Mhm.
case is. And I feel like that rhetoric has kind of fallen back. Um, I think it's important for a company to find its niche and find
Mhm.
its audience and its base. and try to stay true to that. But it depends on what your long-term goal is. If you're
So,
looking to grow versus, because
mhm,
WWE is reaching a point where what else are we going to sell? Where else are we going to grow? We're
mhm,
making billions of dollars, or whatever the profit margin is. I think at some point advertisers may become hesitant if every week it's someone spilling blood or whatever the
mhm,
case is. And I'm not criticizing or picking on, but I am surprised that they have gotten away on the Turner channels with as much as they have. Now the pay-per-views, it's a free for all because
yeah.
you're
Well,
spending money to watch that.
yeah, but I mean, and I think this just shows how much society has changed in
Hmm.
the years since the Attitude Era, because um, I think we talked about before, but if you've read any of the history of WCW books or listen, I'm sure Bischoff has talked about it. You know, during the Attitude Era, WCW Turner networks had strong standards and practices, and they
Hmm.
always complained that like they couldn't say the word ass. They couldn't
Hmm.
say I'm going to beat your ass or I'm going to kick your ass. It was I'm going to kick your butt,
Hmm.
and it just doesn't.
It doesn't, yeah.
It doesn't ring. It sounds.
If you're pissed
It's so
off and ready to fight,
yeah.
I'm gonna kick your gosh darn butt. It doesn't have the same
It was the
appeal.
same impact. So obviously that has changed at Turner Networks with the
Yeah.
years. And as far as pay per view, I mean, you look back at ECW, they had a hard time getting on pay per view because of their content, and there were several companies that wouldn't carry them because of the content. And now it's like, yeah, whatever. And
Hmm.
you know, I mean, you look at other films, reality television stuff, that we see, and I think there's a whole bigger, I think, sociological discourse to be had about where society is heading. And uh, obviously, I we don't have the time, nor I know I don't have the stats and knowledge here to say and discuss that. But to me, that's always an interesting aspect, and I wish I did have the research knowledge to be able to look into that more. Um, but I think your growth point is a valid point because, as I said earlier, uh, I don't think a wrestler is going to move the needle by themselves. Now, if AEW captures a NWO type storyline, will that get people to switch over? Or, I've seen a few wrestling content creators say like WWE right now is dull. It's lost its focus. I'm going
Hmm.
to give AEW a try. Is W and I think um, will people switch or are they? So is the growth there for a potential there for AEW to capitalize on WWE kind of being in cruise control, or again, does it go back to the fact that fans are going to be fans of the company that they like, and it doesn't, they may not like it, and may
Hmm.
not be as enthusiastic as they were 2 years ago, but that's still, how many people switch from Coke to Pepsi because,
Right.
which really isn't a fair assessment because Coke and Pepsi, unless they come out with new Coke, doesn't change anything. So
Yeah. I drink both, by the way, but um,
Pepsi's terrible. Cherry
oh.
Coke, Dr. Pepper is the way to go.
So one thing I noticed last week in watching Raw, and I don't know if this is a new thing because again I watch, but I don't watch. Um,
Mhm.
but one thing that stood out to me, and this may be have happening for a while. I know AEW has done. I know WWE has done it in the past as well. But last week, because everybody complains about the ads, we're watching too many commercials. And last week, for the first time that I can remember in a while, they were doing the side by sides where
Mm,
the wrestling is still happening and then the ad is playing. They mute the sound of the wrestling, but you're still seeing what's happening.
yeah.
Um, is that some way? Is that a way to kind of? And I know we're kind of dipping into another topic here, but we're still talking about the fan base because I do think WWE for all of its profits and good things. One of the things is the consumer confidence and listening to fans, because we have been bitching for years now that there's too
Mhm.
many commercials. I When I watch a pay-per-view, depending on the situation, at Jeremy's, like we talked about at SummerSlam, I thought
Yeah,
the ads were fine because it gave us time to kind of talk and mingle, and this was mostly before you got there, but it
yeah,
wasn't. Whereas with an AEW show, there's not a whole lot of breathing room. It's
no,
match, match,
no,
match, match. So to me, there's got to be a more delicate balance in between. But back in the day, we weren't watching uh, WrestleMania 4 with a bunch of commercials injected into it.
yeah,
And I think, and Conrad Thompson on his podcast recently talked about eventually at some point, targeting these commercials to products that fans actually want,
yeah.
and then using the talent that's already there to sell and promote these things. So would that be a more acceptable venture? I know we've seen before, like Otis and Tozawa back there eating a Little Caesars pizza,
Yeah.
or they have the stuff on the desk. And I think AEW has even explored some of those things. But do you think the commercials, because that's where WWE is going, they're looking at
Yeah.
rights fees and site fees and sponsorships and turnbuckles with whatever on it. Uh, I think the mug dog coming in and celebrating, yeah, it kind of took away from that moment. But again, I didn't lose any sleep over it, but I think there may have been a better way to do that than, or with a different wrestler, because Chad
Yeah.
Gable to me doesn't strike me as a root beer guy. But again, is that part of the process of figuring out how are we going to insert these ads without maybe making it seem so much like a commercial?
Yeah, I can't remember who the female wrestler was, but and I can't remember if it was Raw or something I saw in NXT. But they cut to like the backstage and she's being interviewed and she's got a bucket of KFC and she's eating it. And it's like this seems so unnatural
Right.
that you would do it this way. Not that you'd eat KFC, but just standing backstage eating. But you get again, Bastion Booger, sure, I'm gonna
Right,
believe
right.
it.
The
You
Yeah,
know,
it made sense with Otis back there shoveling pizza into his,
yeah.
because he's
Oh,
a big
because he's
guy.
fat. I
Yeah,
see.
well, I mean,
Fashion.
kinda.
But yes, and I think the problem with the pay-per-view, and maybe it's again, it's because of what we've experienced before, and such a harsh change. It's
Mhm.
instead of being the frog in the boiling water that slowly goes up and you don't realize it, they just threw us right into a boiling
Right.
pot with the commercials. I
Yes.
WrestleMania 39 when they're like getting introducing competitors for the match, and then all of a sudden they play a commercial on the screen. It's like we you just took us out of the moment,
Yeah.
and now we have to come back. So I do think pacing is an issue there, and I do think AEW, even if they don't start doing commercials, need to give time, you know, a bit of downtime between matches just so that fans can kind of regroup. Or we've said it before, if you're there live, then the commercials give you time to go to the bathroom,
Right.
or get something to eat. So and I don't know if that's part of their um, decision making in doing so many commercials. It's like, oh, if we do this, then maybe we'll sell more merchandise, maybe we'll, because people will get up and go. But I just, for TV or for pay-per-view, I think again, WWE is on a subscription base platform for pay-per-views.
Mhm.
AEW, you have to buy the pay-per-view. So I
Mhm.
think that's also the
Yeah.
trade-off. And
Sure.
Tony Khan is like, if you're going to spend $50, I'm going to give you $60 worth of entertainment.
Mhm.
Whereas WWE is like, well, if you're paying $30 for thousands of hours of content
Yeah.
across the
Yeah.
board, we can give you commercials and you're still getting your money's worth
Right.
if you watch the rest of the other content.
Right.
Um, um, which, as an ESPN subscriber, which I plan to cancel after WrestleMania, and I never have. Now I get to watch the WPBL. So the Women's Professional Baseball League. Go Boston Hunters. You're my team and you're terrible. It's kind of fitting. But I thought was going to be. I think for me, my biggest complaint with commercials is because I'll, AEW I watch after it airs because I'm usually not home when it's on. I can
Mhm.
go to HBO Max, go to the replay. A commercial comes on, I hit fast forward, I skip through it. WWE, if it's after it's aired, I go to Netflix. They go to commercial. Hey, you're sitting through 3 minutes of commercial, and
Oh,
it's
are
you
they doing
can't.
that now? Because at one point you could fast
You
forward.
could, yeah. And at one point, if you weren't watching, if you didn't watch live, they cut the commercials out
Yeah, yeah,
altogether.
that's what I mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're not
Now
doing
the
that
last few
anymore.
times, I
Oh,
watched, you had to sit there, and it's bad when you go watch a 3 minute commercial. If you're skipping through a show, you could hit a commercial, and then you come back for like an interview segment, and then another 3 minutes of commercials that you can't skip. And that's,
mhm.
I mean, again, that's my biggest issue. Obviously, the commercialization is a little much, but again, you got bills to pay. So
Well, and I think, and that's where I think kind of tying in, because one of the things I noticed that's missed from the last several WrestleManias is kind of those backstage, because we had those moments, whether
mhm,
it was with a celebrity interaction or the year that they brought out the original main event of WrestleMania, the
mhm,
first WrestleMania, they interacted backstage and kind of made amends with Mr. T and Roddy Piper. Those kinds of things are missing. So that's what you have such a deep talent pool these days. That's where if you get creative with the commercials or the things that the products that they're trying to sell, it could be a win-win for the companies at hand. And because yeah, it's one thing to see a commercial and I'm just throwing out a random celebrity. Tom Cruise is the spokesperson for versus
mhm,
your audience being WWE, and now it's Drew McIntyre trying to sell you this product, or
yeah,
whoever, Danhausen or whoever the popular person is at that time. I think we're still kind of getting that wrestling content, even though they are selling us something, but it doesn't seem as beating us over the head with this being a commercial break. Some of the podcasts I listen to are like
yeah,
that. They naturally flow into the pitch for the product
yeah,
and then back into the conversation where some of them it's a very abrupt halt and
yeah.
okay, this is a spot. So
Yeah. Well, and that's something with watching wrestling is the format of the shows and the match layouts are so consistent where if they go to the outside or if somebody's down, oh, this is the commercial break spot.
mhm.
And it's to me, I mean, am I losing sleep over it? No. Again, we're talking about this because we need content, in a sense, but those tropes are what trying to say this. They're just like it takes me those take me out of the show because I know exactly okay, nothing's going to happen now. And
Mhm.
again, we need to bring back the tape machines. Matches need to end during a commercial break, and
Right.
you know because when you have a match that we're going to spill out to the floor just in time for the commercial break, and then come back and pick back up. It's that suspension of disbelief that
Yeah.
we have to do with wrestling.
Well, and I think, WWE, WCW may have done it, but WWF back in the day, you know, typically speaking, you went to a house show and, Hulk Hogan was going to beat Paul Orndorff or the British
Mm,
Bulldogs were going to beat the Dream Team. But I can remember, in the 90s when sales and business was down, I remember specifically,
mm,
well, hell, even Bret Hart beating Ric Flair for the
yeah,
championship was a house show in
yeah.
Saskatoon,
Saskatchewan, yeah,
Saskatchewan. And so I think they started doing those kinds of things to say, hey, anything truly can happen at these shows.
yeah,
So don't miss your opportunity to see this. Money Inc. and the Steiners. The titles changed hands at a house show in St. Louis. I wasn't there for it, but I think they
yeah,
started doing those kinds of things to show that, yeah, like you said, when we're in a commercial break, oh, it's very convenient that Mox and Ricochet are still wrestling after that no one won this match. So yeah,
yeah,
let's have a win happen, and then we can come back and say, hey, you see new competitors in the ring getting ready to wrestle, but let's take you back 45 seconds ago when
yeah,
this is what happened. This is how that match ended. So yeah, it creates other opportunities and other moments. I think that are those moments that are missing from wrestling to help us.
Mhm.
Because like you said, yeah, so and so goes to the floor. Okay, all right, I'm gonna get my phone out because I know we're getting 3 minutes of commercials coming up right now.
Yeah.
And I think that also, back in the day, what we were watching, whether it was a movie, whether it was a TV show, a wrestling match, whatever, it had our undivided attention because unless we're picking up the newspaper or a magazine to flip through, we didn't have a phone at our
Yeah.
disposal to get on and get distracted with. So I think that the product itself is also facing challenges from all the new technology that's out there that yeah, I can pause this and go run
Yeah.
errands or go to the bathroom or come back and do whatever. So there's a lot of things that companies, creators need to do to capture or maintain, retain that attention. Because yeah, it's great to have them watch once, but you want that follow-up business to come back and continue to watch and whatever you're creating or doing. It's not just wrestling products or movies or music.
Yeah. I was gonna say, trying to be a YouTube creator and getting people to come back and check out,
Hmm.
other stuff that you do.
Yeah.
If anybody has the answer on how to do that, let me know because
I
try to
wouldn't
figure
be
that
going
one
to
out.
work tomorrow if I knew that answer. So, but yeah, that is, that, and that's a whole other,
Yeah.
conversation. But I think as the world, we expand the world of being able to have information and content at our fingertips, WWE is doing more with YouTube and putting the
Yeah.
WCW Vault out, for example, and giving that free content. Whereas before I had to buy the WWE Network for 9.99 a month and be able to watch,
Yeah.
you know, Bash at the Beach 1993 or whatever it was. And now they're putting AAA. I think most of the content from AAA now under the WWE umbrella is free
Mhm.
on YouTube. AEW was doing some of that as well. So I think giving some of that free stuff away may entice and get people to then, well, okay, I'm getting to watch X amount of content for free. I'll pay the $30 to get ESPN to watch, you know, the premium events, if you will, or the HBO Max or whatever the case may end up being.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
As I say,
yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, I don't know if you saw it, but Lucha Underground has started putting up their shows on YouTube
Hmm.
for free. So I think we should do a watch along at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't see a whole lot of Lucha Underground back in the day, so
Yeah, I think I only really
I'll
watched most of the first two seasons, and I didn't realize how many episodes there are. Like they were doing, I think 40 episodes a season. So I wanted to go back because now that there are so many alumni that are in
yeah,
AEW and WWE, go back and watch it. Yeah, because I guess Chelsea Green and Penta have a match
right.
somewhere in there. So and Io
Yeah,
Sky. So
and it's kind of like, back way back, I say way back, but in terms of today, uh Chikara produced a lot
yeah,
of talent that ended up going on to WWE or to AEW that,
yep.
some that fans don't know or maybe don't remember that were there in Chikara as well. And so some of these promotions that were kind of looked at as, I don't want to say a joke, but not taken as seriously as WWE or ECW or
Mhm.
WCW, ended up producing some of the big names that we're cheering for or booing in today's wrestling world. Chad, any other like thoughts on the viral moments of the things that are happening today? Is there something that happens today that uh, would have happened back in the 80s or the 90s that how do we keep these moments alive today? Because like you said, with social media you can watch it, but then in 24, 48, 72 hours you listen to these podcasts too and they talk about uh, a lot of the Conrad shows, and again that's my frame of reference.
Mhm.
He went from doing the deep dives of the nostalgia of 83 weeks or with Eric
Mhm.
Bischoff or with or with Tony Schiavone or Bruce Pritchard. They were talking about what was happening on WCW Saturday night. And now most of his shows have shifted to where he's looking at the news of the week and then
Mhm.
every show is the same. He's asking Jeff Jarrett and Eric Bischoff and Tony Schiavone and JBL the same questions every week about the same talking points. I've heard everyone's take on the Avery Styles situation, for example. I
He's
miss
going to
the
appear at TNA Lockdown tonight
right.
as we record this, you know?
I miss the talk of the stuff that, and again, this kind of goes back to the whole Unreal conversation, and they're exposing too much. But then these
Yeah.
podcasts, for decades or more than a decade now, have exposed those things.
Yeah.
Unreal's just doing it in a different way, but we learned about the backstage things that were happening with Ric Flair versus Hulk Hogan, or the
Mhm.
Goldberg title switch, or what the rationale was for Eric to put pay-per-view quality matches on Monday nights against the WWE. So I don't think Unreal it has changed some of that, but the genie left the bottle a long time ago. And some of it was based on these fan podcasts that have grown into now these celebrity podcasts. And I don't know what point I'm trying to make, but I do not necessarily, because we talk about it so much now, the stuff that's happening today, is it going to be noteworthy or talked about 20 years from now?
Well, I'm going to go in a different direction of something that we've talked about, I'm sure, before, and I've had several conversations with other friends. Music, you know,
Hmm.
look at the bands, like Rolling Stones, U2, Bon Jovi, bands that are still out there 40, 50 years
Hmm.
on.
Right.
Besides Green Day, which I guess came out before 2000 anyway, they're early 90s band, but what band that has come to popularity after 2000 do you see still being out there in another 10 years to
Hmm.
the success, selling out arenas that
Hmm.
they are, Taylor Swift, probably, maybe if she continues to do music.
Right.
Um, but there's not, and granted, my music knowledge of past 2000 is not the greatest, but,
Right.
and I don't know if that's a symptom of getting old and being out of touch with what's hip and popular. And so I'm not listening to the stuff that would be there. Same way with wrestling. Is it, we've again talked about before, when you're a kid, you're watching wrestling, that's your focus. Okay, Survivor Series is coming up. These are the 5-man teams,
Hmm.
and you're reading the magazines, and you're watching, and you're booking your own thing. And now you're like, oh yeah, Survivor Series is coming up. Wait, who's wrestling? Who's going to be on? And then a month later, you're like, who fought at that pay-per-view? Who,
Right.
I is it not necessarily a symptom of nothing's memorable? Is it just not memorable to us? But is it memorable to the 12-year-old or the 14-year-old that's watching now, or not? And again, it's not a question I can answer. So
I think part of it is, like you said, back in that time period, there wasn't the choices,
yeah,
the number of companies, the number of talent, the number of whatever you want to say. But then also, we're in more control now. Back
sure,
then at 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings, WWF Superstars came on. And that was the
yeah,
only, unless I popped in a VHS to record it, that was the only time I could watch it.
yeah,
Now I can put it on my way to work. I can watch it on my lunch break. I can watch it at 3 o'clock in the morning. If I wake up in the middle of the night and start doom scrolling, it's at my fingertips. And
yeah,
and if I don't like it, I can swipe it away. Back then, I couldn't fast forward through
yeah,
Superstars unless again I had recorded it on a tape. So I think we are a society today of swipe right, swipe left, swipe up, swipe down, wherever we're swiping, but we don't have to watch it for
yep,
any length of time anymore. We
yeah,
can move on pretty quickly and forget about those things, because how many times do you log into Facebook or Twitter or TikTok or YouTube, and I'm guilty of this too, because I know there are different audiences on these channels, so you're putting your content out wherever it can go.
yeah,
But I'm seeing the same thing from my friends that post across all those channels, and I think that's just because again, we're moving on. People don't necessarily stick around and watch something, so they don't have to watch it.
yeah.
And so that's where the companies, I think, need to get. So as far as creating those moments, I think, yeah, and I would be curious to hear from a person in their teens or 20s or even early 30s, of what is memorable to them. What are they, what nostalgia are they holding on to? Because again, this box set, what from today is the 14, this was in 84. I was 11 years old when this happened, this
Mhm.
Cyndi Lauper moment. I'm 53, so 42 years later, I'm buying this. What happened this week in wrestling that 42 years from now, a 12-year-old is going to go out and buy? I don't know. I don't know what that answer is. But again,
Yeah.
and I haven't watched the whole episode, but you and Jeremy talked about, the content, and I think even you and Mike talked about the things that happen in our youth stick with us more. Again, this
Mhm.
moment, if I were started watching wrestling in 98, yeah, I would probably be more enamored and in love with the Attitude Era than I am. Yeah, it had its moments, but it's not my favorite era in wrestling. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, you know, like we said, I think the stuff in the golden era obviously is memorable, not just because we were kids, but again, it goes back to there wasn't memorable moments every week.
yes,
And now, not saying that there is every week, but there's the potential for a
yes.
memorable moment every week. And
Well, I
again,
would argue there's the expectation from the
the,
fans, and maybe even some of the promote that there's
yeah,
that memorable moment every week,
yeah,
and
you
we
know,
shouldn't expect it. I don't think.
yeah. And as an AEW fan, I, I think Dynamite is your main show, obviously, and Collision is more of the throwback show because there's usually two or three squash matches with enhancement talent, local talent on there,
Hmm.
which I think has a place in today's wrestling, but it just makes Collision seem less important.
Hmm.
And um, I don't know what my point was going to be with that, but just I wanted to say that there's enhancement talent out there. Um, but yeah, so I think as for expectations, if I guess, but well, I'll go is Dynamite's the one that I'm going to expect things from. Collision is I watch wrestling, so I'm going to watch the show.
Hmm.
Raw and SmackDown have, I think, a good balance of being totally separate entities. And you have the same expectations for both shows.
Hmm.
But again, what's the expectation on Raw right now? Jey Uso's going to come out. He's going to run it back. He's going to eat some. And then Roman Reigns will come out and, say he's the tribal chief. And LA Knight will get buried.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, friends,
But
we've gone
yeah,
over an hour talking about this, so we want to hear from you. Weigh in, answer some of the questions we threw out there. Again, be sure to share and like this podcast, leave a review, follow the Facebook page, do all the likes, clicks, all that kind of good stuff, and get the word out. Chad, anything else before we put a bow on this?
I'm just going to self promote, go to YouTube, search Wrestling with Logic. It's Kevin Huntberger's favorite YouTube short series. Um,
It's definitely
uh,
not fair and balanced, folks. So don't go into expecting to
how
hear
is it not
anything
fair and
negative about
balanced?
AEW, because he barely mentioned a few minutes ago the Chris Jericho thing, but he left out the part where Jericho yelled at Don Callis first to get
Oh, yeah,
off
that was
and
terrible.
then drug his opponent. Instead of keeping him in the middle of the ring where he's going to submit, he drags him over, leans in to get whacked in the head with the screwdriver. Now,
It
where's the
was
logic of that? That you're not going to see that on Wrestling with Logic, but you'll hear it here on my 1 2 3 cents, because I am fair and balanced.
that was a totally stupid point, stupid aspect on Jericho. And yes, if I knew how to put that into an episode, but I try to be fair and balanced. But this will ask, real quick question for the viewer after watching Wrestling with Logic: is there a difference between bad booking and illogical booking? We can discuss next time. But
Yes, that'll be a question for the next time we get together and do the podcast. So, friends, again, thanks for watching. Check out Chad's content. The links are in the write up for this week's episode as well. We appreciate you being here, and we'll see you next time.